You're with me, Angela Stretch. You're listening to Arts Friday. I'm with you up to midday. Our first story takes us to Articulate Project Space, where artist Stephen Dubau, also known as Sid Sledge, presents Between Water and Water. The exhibition reflects upon landscape, movement and perception, inviting viewers to consider water not simply as physical element, but as a place of memory, transition and continual change. Well, I caught up with Stephen in Darlinghurst to find out about the ideas behind the exhibition, his creative process, and how the experience of place informs his practice. And then,
I've been working on this project for a while, and it's, I've always worked at the interface of art and science. I was a scientist, so I'm really interested in. I asked the question, what does this space look like between art and science? Like, can it be defined? Can it be understood or known? And by extension, I'm just interested in those in-between spaces. So for this work, I started with the idea of Darwin's book, which is a book that I kind of grew up with, Darwin's Origin of Species. And as a Jewish artist, I was really interested in how does science, the doctrine of biology, how does that interact with the doctrine of religion? How can those seemingly completely irreconcilable systems that both exist inside of me, how can that exist? How can that be? So I wanted to do a project, or I wanted to ask the question, but not in a judgmental way, just in an empirical way. Like, I could reason it out theoretically, but I'm not interested in that. I wanted to just essentially wander into the texts of Darwin and the texts of Genesis and look for patterns, treat the words as if they are objects, not looking for meaning, just to see. And I asked a very simple question: does the text of Genesis, those first 7 days of the creation mythology, can I cut them out? Can I directly excise them from the book of Charles Darwin's Origin of Species? It's a very empirical result. It's either in there or it isn't. So I set about a couple of years ago now, just really cutting out those words and trying to recreate the story of essentially rewrite Genesis. But literally, I was not using I was essentially a mechanism. So I wanted to see, can it be recreated as a third text, but using Darwin's actual words that he would have typed 200 years ago. And I mean, the first thing that just kind of made my head spin was, it started off quite easy. So Genesis starts in the beginning of God's creating. So, if I look for the word in Darwin's book, it's no problem. He uses it lots. No problem. It's there all over the place. The word beginning, the third word in the Genesis story, I had to read Darwin's whole book because the word beginning only occurs once. He only uses that word once, and in the very last sentence. So that to me is an extraordinary symmetry. Like, you can argue about what it might mean nothing, but the point is it's a symmetry of the territory of the books, of the worlds of those books, not what they're saying, but if you treat them as geographical objects, that is a beautiful discovery of the landscape of these two books. So that's what pushed me to continue the project. And then what you're really left with is all the words that are then missing, the words that are not in there. And that leads to gives opportunities for kind of what I call word drawings, where I'm experimenting with drawing using words as objects, and also like trying to stay true to the process of evolution. So treating myself again as if I was a mechanism, not applying judgment. And the reason for that is it's not that I don't trust judgment. As a South African artist, like many of my attributes, Jewish, South African, I grew up under apartheid, and apartheid is a very hierarchical system. It's the orders come from the top, and they have an effect of the population at the bottom. And when I was a student studying evolution, I didn't realize this at the time. I had to be an artist for about 10, 15 years before I realized why I resonated so strongly with the ideas of evolution. And that's because evolution, the mechanism by which it works, is completely iterative. non-judgmental. It is there's nothing telling it what to do. It follows a very simple iterative process, and an imperfect process at that. So there's nothing telling it what to do. And as a young student, look, I benefited from apartheid. Let's not kid ourselves here. But I wasn't a fan. I was very against apartheid, as a liberal, young liberal. But I benefited from it. But I was also very, very, it was obviously extremely problematic. And subsequently, I realized the reason I loved evolution so much is that it was a complete contradiction to what growing up under apartheid was. So I studied it as a student, and then when I eventually turned to the arts, I realized that affinity didn't disappear, and I started to incorporate it into my methodology as an artist. Again, with that thing, I trust that. I don't trust what my brain is going to come up with, what its judgmental nature is going to say about the world. I trust the process. I trust an empirical process where I can encounter different things in a naive way so that they can inform me about the reality that I'm interested in, rather than me imposing a judgment on the reality that I'm in. So that was for this exhibition. I stayed as true as I possibly could to that idea of mechanism, evolution, and that's really what drove the whole process.
The artist Stephen Isaac Dubar, also known as Sid Sledge, talking us through his exhibition Between Water and Water at Articulate Project Space in Leichardt on Parramatta Road. It's on until the end of the week. And he had a performance as part of the Artist Talk, which happened last weekend, and it was recorded, and we get a chance to have a little insight into how that was received.
I'm trying to remember what it is that I'm holding here. It's a lot of words. So what actually happens is, part of this work was I wanted to take the words of Genesis, but out of Darwin's Origin of Species, literally cut them out. And after having done that for the first 5 days of the creation story, I went through Darwin's book, and I noticed that the way the words had been excised had changed the order of Genesis itself. So it made it through science, through the work of Darwin, Genesis had been restructured. So I'm now going to read the new restructured Genesis as it is reordered by reading it through Darwin's words. And light deep it, the of in the, as and the every the. And foul there said be 2 was years, which the upon on. And was, of good soul, set said be separate serve and in. Of waters in own the, he they to the earth let forth astonishingly seed that yielding. Increase saw trees, and it the midst greater, and the let a being, and the day winged light were, and called were it two of as. The herbage it the, let after between light earth, and called and a be. There seas with waters, and there the and darkness that like darkness. Darkness said, fruit the 2, it's the 2 was the there. Of and the 2 and there created, give to thee, to God the there. Earth thee, to the waters expanse vegetation, the fruit, the light multiply. In and surface fruit in them, yielding light, the and third call it yielding. About was let, was made, was that day, and saw morning, evening, greater day, evening. Was the and the by was upon of, and it the there appear for that let and brought and saw was, so kind is one upon. So it's and the was seed, the and there is separated, either with the lesser on and the and upon waters, one to water made living, the there separate area, that then kind of and over a creature was dry, the earth, and to fill day earth, its and each so waters, let water day containing. There was the fourth, they between let, called the a and between, and waters of when kind surface day, sea shall said after land, earth was earth, called and was the living every, and land of great was earth, kind it waters, fly it, and was waters across soil containing seed, good waters, and shell and thee. The seed above their day, and separated after days, the which earth and good there, and dry separate, and the there stars was, and vegetation that be. So was presence, let it all there, and the same said yielding for second with into its the and the good fifth. Said but serve and between by, beneath shall each, to light, which the there after day that was good.
Stephen Dubar performing what was the Genesis, Darwin's Origin of Species, in a variation of a form. And Between Water and Water is currently on at Articulate Project Space and till the end of the week. You can find out more by going to articulateprojectspace.org. You're with Ange on Arts Friday. Up next, we're going to be taking you to the lockup in Newcastle for Wendy Sharp's Into